Ghost fam? Hope you're all doing wonderful today. So sorry about yesterday. I was working and I totally didn't even remember that it was Monday until like way late because I worked Sunday. So, but I hope everybody is doing well. How is everybody? Please let me know how you are. See Leighton, Layla, and Anna Katrina here earlier. But yep, I was just sitting here literally ready, waiting for the time, and I thought, hey, I'll just hit the live button. Come on a little bit early. See if I can finally get this done in 10 minutes or less, as far as the cube goes. Wing Weaver, how's it going? It is good to see you. How are you doing? Jesse, how are you doing? Sorry, I was mega lurking on that Tauros today, but it turned out really good. How did you like it? Pretty good. Update on Knack, lost all my matches, but still had fun. Let's go. I'm glad you still had fun. That is what it is all about. JB's, how's it going? It is good to see you, my friend. That's totally fine. I appreciate that. The hectic week that I've been going through, it's coming to an end as Friday approaches. Needless to say, I have deadlines, and that deadline is Friday. So, really trying to get everything done by Thursday so I can give myself Friday off and give myself a little treat that way. Excellent. What's up, New Zealand clan? It's always good to see you. I need that one. So what's this book about? Can you give us a summary before I start reading? Well, this is the John Carter series. So it's all about John Carter of Mars. This is actually book number 5. So we've gone through John Carter going to Mars, finding love. We've gone through the warlords and the gods of Mars. We followed the story of Thuvia, maid of Mars. And now we are about to start book number 5, The Chessmen of Mars. And honestly, I have not quite an idea of what it's about quite yet. But we're going to start it, and there's a nice little preface here by John Carter himself. We started reading it last Monday, but for those that remember, we were having quite the trouble with YouTube and it wanting to buffer through the story, so we're actually going to just start the book over today. Hey, Johnny Knight, how's it going? It is good to see you. What? Sorry, I don't know why there's a giveaway open. I don't even have Streamlabs open. I wasn't fixing to give away anything. At least not tonight, though that is something that I may start in the future on our reading streams, is doing small giveaways and seeing what I can do to keep it in theme. Oh yeah, look at that. Sure did. Had that giveaway open from last time. Sorry, y'all. No, that's all right. That's all right. I appreciate you guys. And yeah, that's something that I will consider in the future for sure, because I think that you guys hanging out with me is giveaway worthy. I forgot that I was low-key timing myself here. That could work. Okay. Fine with me. Nick Nick! How's it going, Nick Nick? standalone. What was that? Are these books standalone, like the Persona games, or if I start on this, would I understand it? You would understand it, I'm fairly certain. There's references to previous stories, like John Carter being from Earth has superhuman agility on Mars because his muscles are stronger than Martians. But essentially, no, I think that you should be all right. It is a one continuous story, but it does pretty good about explaining things as it goes. Well, okay. Let's do it this way then. Yeah, should have saw that coming. All right, appreciate y'all. For those unfamiliar, I do like to challenge myself with the Rubik's Cube and giving the first 10 minutes or so while we wait for peeps to come on in. Oh, crud. It's my goal to get this one down to 10 minutes or less. I'm at the 6-minute mark now. Probably not gonna do it, but still gonna try. And nope. Blue, red, green, orange, cool. God, the first pair is always so difficult to find. And all these colors. Pair them up twice that way. Boom. Red, green. There. Hello, hello, everybody. Sorry if I'm missing the chats as you're coming in. Just trying to best my time. Yeah. No. Yes. Yeesh. What is that? Green, yellow. But tell me, how was your day? I know I almost said how was your Monday? I know that we are on Tuesday, but how was everybody's Tuesday? I'm working right through this. Actually, I'm making okay. Oh, I'm just past the 10-minute mark already, though. All right, well, that's a failure. That's fail. I just gotta keep working at it, keep practicing every single day, and eventually I'll be able to do it. Okay, probably still gonna finish it, even though I didn't hit my time. But that is because I had a long day, had a long week, and I just want to do my cube before I start reading. Cool. Pair 'em up, pair 'em up. Accidental pair, I will take it. Cool. Alright, let's rock. I got a lot to catch up on in the chat. I know that. Sorry, Al. I'm in the zone. Mm, good, good, not good. All right. Ah, oh, yeah, there we go. Oh, Alice, how's it going? Jake's dog, how's it going? It's good to see you. But my channel is dead. I don't post anymore. I only edit for others now. That's quite all right. Appreciate you, Ryan. Tuesday, yesterday, late and organized birthday party for Layla, and also set a video call with her mom and siblings in Australia. Long night, just chilling today. Let's go. You're good, Coat. Bit fast for me. Sith, everyone coming in at once. Never seen 7 people actually active before. They usually lurk in like 3 or 4 chatting, that kind of number I'm used to. You see my D? I did. I did see your DM. That is it's going to be quite the undertaking, but I'm happy to do it. It seems like a really cute idea. Yes, Narnia will be continued tomorrow in Discord. So for those that do want to, um, enjoy reading and do like the Chronicles of Narnia. We do a Discord reading on Wednesdays, and that is in my Discord, exclamation Discord if you want to jump in. We do have a special voice chat channel just for story time. And so we are going to continue, probably finish The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe tomorrow. And we're going to continue doing that on Wednesdays in Discord because Discord can't copyright me. So we can read whatever we want to there. But here we do have to follow the public domain, and right now our public domain book series is the Barsoomian series of John Carter from Mars. And we are going to start book 5, which is The Chessmen of Mars. Editor, work for Ebony, but trying to increase workflow. None that I know of, but I'll keep my ear out. If I hear anything, Wing Weaver, I'll send them your way for sure. Going to take a nap, but I think I might sketch instead. That is not a bad alternative. I am tired. I'm a bit hungry. I'm not like starving. I did eat, but I think I'm ready for dinner. But I do want to do this. I wanted to feel a little bit normal this week, and so it being Tuesday, we're going to jump into our book. We're going to try and get through the prelude and 5 chapters is my hope. Seems like YouTube is acting a little bit better tonight, thank goodness. So let's just jump into the prelude and see how far we can get in our 2-hour time frame. But I appreciate you all being here. Grab your favorite drink, grab a cozy blanket, cuddle up. It is time for story time with Kev the Pokey Ghost. As we start book 5 in the series, The Chessmen of Mars, Prelude, John Carter Comes to Earth. Shay had just beaten me at chess, as usual, and also as usual, I had gleaned what questionable satisfaction I might by twitting him with this indication of failing mentality by calling his attention to the nth time to that theory propounded by certain sciences, which is based upon the assertion that phenomenal chess players are always found to be from the ranks of children under 12, adults over 72, or the mentally defective. A theory that is lightly ignored upon those rare occasions that I win. Shay had gone to bed, and I should have followed suit, for we are always in the saddle here before sunrise. But instead I sat there before the chess table in the library, idly blowing smoke at the dishonored head of my defeated king. While thus profitably employed, I heard the east door of my living room open and someone enter. I thought it was Shay returning to speak with me on some matter of tomorrow's work, but when I raised my eyes to the doorway that connects the 2 rooms, I saw framed there the figure of a bronzed giant, his otherwise naked body trapped with the jewel-encrusted harness from which there hung at one side an ornate short sword and the other a pistol of strange pattern. The black hair, the steel-gray eyes, brave and smiling, the noble features. I recognized them at once, and leaping to my feet, I advanced with outstretched hand. "John Carter!" I cried. "You!" "None other, my son," he replied, taking my hand in one of his and placing the other upon my shoulder. "And what are you doing here?" I asked. "It has been long years since you revisited Earth, and never before in the trappings of Mars, Lord. But it is good to see you, and not a day older in appearance than when you trotted me on your knee in my babyhood. How do you explain it, John Carter, warlord of Mars, or do you try to explain it?" "Why attempt to explain the inexplainable?" he replied. "As I have told you before, I am a very old man. I do not know how old I am. I recall no childhood, but recollect only having been always as you see me now, and as you saw me first when you were 5 years old. You yourself have aged, though not as much as most men in a corresponding number of years, which may be accounted for the fact that the same blood runs in your veins. But I have not aged at all. I have discussed the question with the noted Martian scientist, a friend of mine, but his theories are still only theories. However, I am content with the fact I never age, and I love life and the vigor of youth." And now is your natural question as to what brings me to Earth again, and in this, to earthly eye, strange habiliment, we may thank Car Cormac, the bowman of Lothar. It was he who gave me the idea upon which I have been experimenting until I last have achieved success. As you know, I have long possessed the power to cross the void in spirit, but never before have I been able to impart to inanimate things a similar power. Now, however, you see me for the first time precisely as my Martian fellows see me. You see the very short sword that has tasted the blood of many a savage foeman, the harness with the device of helium and the insignia of my rank, the pistol that was presented to me by Tars Tarkas, Jeddak of Thark. Aside from seeing you, which is my principal reason for being here, and satisfying myself that I can transport inanimate things from Earth to Mars, and therefore inanimate things if so I desire, I have no purpose. Earth is not for me. My very interest is upon Barsoom. My wife, my children, my work, all are there. I will spend a quiet evening with you and then back to the world I love even better than I love life. As he spoke, he dropped into the chair upon the opposite side of the chess table. You spoke of children, I said. Have you more than Carthoris? A daughter, he replied, only a little younger than Carthoris, and bearing one, the fairest thing that ever breathed the thin air of dying Mars. Only Dejah Thoris, her mother, could be more beautiful than Terra of Helium. For a moment, he fingered the chessmen idly. We have a game on Mars similar to chess, he said, very similar. And there is a race there that plays it grimly with men and naked swords. We call the game Jitan, and it is played on a board like yours, except that there are 100 squares, and we use 20 pieces on each side. I never see it played without thinking of Tara of Helium and what befell her among the chessmen of Barsoom. Would you like to hear her story? I said that I would, and so he told it to me. And now I shall try to retell it to you, for as nearly in the words of the warlord of Mars as I can recall them, but in the third person. If there be inconsistencies and errors, let the blame befall not upon John Carter, but rather upon my faulty memory, where it belongs. It is a strange tale, and utterly Barsoomian. You'll read Hunting and Homicide. I have a book on hand, but I haven't opened to look, but it looks so very interesting, huh? Maybe. It depends on if it was written in the 1800s or early 1900s. I can't read anything that's been current. What do you call normal, Uncle Kev? We aren't a normal family, as we have been told. We laughed and said, what's normal to you? We will never forget, fit the mold. So we're normal in our eyes with no judgment. What did I say normal? I'm trying to remember what I said to spawn that. But no, it's not fun to be normal. And normal to me is certainly not normal in the definition of the word. Normal is what makes you happy. Oh, normal day. I got you. Uh, yeah, normal day. Uh, Seems a little bit repetitive, but after this week, I am really looking forward to coming back strong and being able to spend a lot more time with y'all because work has taken a lot of my time, but we're going to get back into semi sort of schedule. I get to get back into the artwork tenfold and dedicate daily to it. Where my wrists don't hurt, I think it's current, like it came out last year, but if YouTube can't let you read, maybe on Discord, I'll send you what it's about later. Yeah, definitely you can do that. I also have to make sure that it's audience friendly. Like I'm not quite too sure if I want to get into the gruesome quite yet, especially with so many kids that come and listen. But yeah, definitely, even if it's on the side that I read to myself, I'm always looking for good books to read. All right, well, that was a good prelude. So John Carter came and telling this guy about his daughter, Tara of Helium, and what befell her with the chessmen of Mars. That's what the book's about. So let's meet Tara. Chapter 1, Tara in a Tantrum. Fear is different than gore. We'll talk about it. Halloween is soon. Tara in a Tantrum. Tara of Helium rose from the pile of silks and soft furs upon which she had been reclining, stretched her lithe body languidly, and crossed toward the center of the room, where, above a large table, a bronze disc depended from a low ceiling. Her carriage was that of health and physical perfection, the effortless harmony of faultless coordination. A scarf of silken gossamer crossing over one shoulder was wrapped about her body. Her black hair was piled high upon her head. With a wooden stick, she tapped upon the bronze disc lightly, and presently the summons was answered by a slave girl, who entered, smiling, to be greeted similarly by her mistress. "Are my father's guests arriving?" asked the princess. "Yes, Tara of Helium, they come," replied the slave. "I have seen Kantos Khan, overlord of the navy, and Prince Sorin of Tharth, and Jor Kantos, son of Kantos Khan." She shot a roguish glance at her mistress as she mentioned Jor Kantos's name. "And oh, there were others. Many have come." "The bath, then, Euthea," said her mistress. "And why, Euthea?" she added. "Do you look thus and smile when you mention the name of Jor Kantos?" The slave girl laughed gaily. "It is so plain to all that he worships you," she replied. "It is not plain to me," said Tara of Helium. "He is a friend of my brother, Carthoris, and so he is here much, but not to see me. It is his friendship for Carthoris that brings him thus often to the palace of my father." "But Carthoris is hunting in the north with Talu, Jeddak of Okar," Euthea reminded her. "My bath, Euthea," cried Tara of Helium. "That tongue of yours will bring you some misadventure yet." "The bath is ready, Tara of Helium," the girl responded, her eyes still twinkling with merriment, for she well knew that in the heart of her mistress was no anger that could displace the love of the princess of her slave. Preceding the daughter of the warlord, she opened the door of the adjoining room where lay the bath, a glimmering pool of scented water in a marble basin. Golden stanchions supported a chain of gold encircling it and leading down into the water on either side of the marble steps. A glass dome let in the sunlight, which flooded the interior. Glancing from the polished white of the marble walls and the procession of the bathers and fishes, which, in conventional design, were inlaid with gold in a broad band that circled the room. Tara of Helium removed the scarf from about her and handed it to the slave. Slowly she descended the steps to the water, the temperature of which she tested with a symmetrical foot, undeformed by tight toes and high heels. A lovely foot, as God intended that feet should be and seldom are. Finding the water to her liking, the girl swam leisurely to and fro about the pool. With the silken ease of the seal she swam, now at the surface, now below, her smooth muscles rolling softly beneath her clear skin, a wordless song of health and happiness and grace. Presently she emerged and gave herself into the hands of the slave girl, who rubbed the body of her mistress with a sweet-smelling, semi-liquid substance contained in a golden urn, until the glowing skin was covered with a foamy lather. Then a quick plunge into the pool and drying with soft towels, and the bath was over. Typical of the life of the princess was a simple elegance of her bath. No retinue of useless slaves, no pomp, no idle wastes of precious moments. In another half an hour her hair was dried and built into the strange but becoming coiffure of her station. Her leathern trappings, encrusted with gold and jewels, had been adjusted to her figure, and she was ready to mingle with the guests that had been bidden to the midday function at the palace of the warlord. As she left her apartments to make her way to the gardens where the guests were congregating, two warriors, the insignia of the house of the Prince of Helium upon their harness, followed the few paces behind her. Grim reminders that the assassin's blade may never be ignored upon Barsoom, where, in a measure, it counterbalances the great natural span of human life, which is estimated at not less than 1,000 years. As they neared the entrance to the garden, another woman, similarly guarded, approached them from another quarter of the great palace. As she neared them, Tara of Helium turned towards her with a smile and a happy greeting, while her guards knelt and bowed their heads in willing involuntary adoration of the beloved Helium. Thus always, solely at the command of their own hearts, did the warriors of Helium greet Dejah Thoris, whose deathless beauty had more than once brought them to bloody warfare and other nations of Barsoom. So great was the love of the people of Helium for the maid of John Carter, it amounted practically to worship, as though she were indeed the goddess that she looked. The mother and daughter exchanged the gentle Barsoomian "Kor" of greeting and kissed, and together they entered the gardens where the guests were. A huge warrior drew his short sword and struck his metal shield with the flat of it, the brazen sound ringing out above the laughter and speech. "The princess comes!" he cried. "Dejah Thoris, the princess comes! Tara of Helium!" Thus always is royalty announced. The guests arose, the two women inclined their heads, the guards fell back upon either side of the entranceway. A number of nobles advanced to pay their respects. The laughing and talking were resumed, and Dejah Thoris and her daughter moved simply and naturally among their guests. No suggestions of differing rank apparent in the bearing of any who were there, though there were more than a single Jeddak and many common warriors whose only title lay in brave deeds or noble patriotism. Thus it is upon Mars, where men are judged upon their own merits rather than upon those of their grandsires, even though pride of lineage be great. Tara of Helium let her slow gaze wander among the throng of guests until presently it halted upon one she sought. Was the faint shadow of a frown that crossed her brow an indication of displeasure at the sight that met her eyes, or did the brilliant rays of the noonday sun distress her? Who may say? She had been reared to believe that one day she would wed Jor Kantos, son of her father's best friend. It had been the dearest wish of Kantos Khan and the warlord that this should be, and Tara of Helium had accepted it as a matter of all but accomplished fact. Jor Kantos had seemed to accept the matter in the same way. They had spoken of it casually as something that would, as a matter of course, take place in the indefinite future, as for instance his promotion in the navy in which he was now a Padwar, or the set functions of the court of her grandfather, Tardos Mors, Jeddak of Helium, or death. They had never spoken of love, and that had puzzled Tara of Helium upon the rare occasion she gave it thought, for she knew that people who were to wed were usually much occupied with the matter of love, and she had all a woman's curiosity. She wondered what love was like. She was very fond of Jor Kantos, and she knew that he was very fond of her. They liked to be together, for they liked the same things and the same people and the same books, and their dancing was a joy, not only to themselves but to those who watched them. She could not imagine wanting to marry anyone other than Jor Kantos. So perhaps it was only the sun that made her brows contract just the tiniest bit at the same instant she discovered Jor Kantos sitting in the earnest conversation with Olivia Marthis, daughter of the Jet of Hastor. It was Jor Kantos's duty immediately to pay his respects to Dejah Thoris and Tara of Helium, but he did not do so, and presently the daughter of the warlord frowned indeed. She looked long at Olivia Marthis, and though she had seen her many times before and knew her well, she looked at her today through new eyes that saw, apparently for the first time, that the girl from Hastor was noticeably beautiful even among those other beautiful women of Helium. Tara of Helium was disturbed. She attempted to analyze her emotions, but found it difficult. Olivia Mathis was her friend. She was very fond of her, and she felt no anger towards her. Was she angry with Jor Kantos? No, she finally decided that she was not. It was merely surprise, then, that she felt surprised that Jor Kantos could be more interested in another than herself. She was about to cross the garden and join them when she heard her father's voice directly behind her. "Tara of Helium!" he cried, and she turned to see him approaching with a strange warrior whose harness and metal bore devices with which she was unfamiliar. Even among the gorgeous trappings of the men of Helium and the visitors from the distant empires, those of the stranger were remarkable for their barbaric splendor. The leather of his harness was completely hidden beneath ornaments of platinum thickly set with brilliant diamonds, as were the scabbards of his swords and the ornate holster that held his long Martian pistol. Moving through the sunlit garden at the side of the great warlord, the scintillant rays of his countless gems enveloping him as in an aureole of light imparted to his noble figure and suggests a suggestion of godliness. "Tara of Helium, I bring you Gon, Jet of Gothol," said John Carter after a simple Barsoomian custom of presentation. "Kor, Gon, Jet of Garthol," returned Tara of Helium. "My sword is at your feet, Tara of Helium," said the young chieftain. The warlord left them, and the two seated themselves upon the airside bench beneath the spreading sorpish tree. "Far Gathol, far Gathol," mused the girl. Ever in my mind has it been connected with mystery and romance of the half-forgotten lore of the ancients. I cannot think of Gothol as existing today, possibly because I have never seen before a Gotholian, and perhaps too because of the great distance that separates Helium and Gothol, as well as the comparative insignificance of my little free city, which might easily be lost in one corner of mighty Helium, added Gohan. But what we lack in power we make up in pride, he continued, laughing. We believe ours the oldest inhabited city upon Barsoom. It is one of the few that has retained its freedom, and this despite the fact that its ancient diamond mines are the richest known, and unlike practically all the other fields, are today apparently as inexhaustible as ever. Tell me of Guthul, urged the girl. The very thought fills me with interest. Nor was it likely that the handsome face of the young Jed detracted anything from the glamour of far Guthul. Nor did Gahan seem displeased with the excuse for further monopolizing the society of his the society of his fair companion. His eyes seemed chained to her exquisite features, from which they moved no further than to a rounded breast, part hidden beneath a jeweled covering, a naked shoulder, or the symmetry of a perfect arm, resplendent in bracelets and barbaric magnificence. Your ancient history has doubtless told you that Gothol was built upon an island of Throxus, mightiest of the five oceans of old Barsoom. As the ocean receded, Gothol crept down the sides of the mountain, the summit of which was the island upon which she had been built, until today she covers the slopes from summit to base, while the bowels of the great hill are honeycombed with the galleries of her mines. Entirely surrounding us is the great salt marsh, which protects us from invasion by land, while the rugged and ofttimes vertical topography of our mountain renders the landing of hostile airships a precarious undertaking. That and your brave warriors? Suggested the girl. Gahan smiled. We do not speak of that except to enemies, he said, and then with tongues of steel rather than flesh. But what practice in the art of war has a people with nature has thus protected from attack? Asked Tara of Helium, who had liked the young Jed's answer to her previous question, but yet in whose mind persisted a vague conviction of the possible infamacy of her companion, induced doubtless by the magnificence of his trappings and weapons, which carried a suggestion of splendid show rather than grim utility. Our natural barriers, while they have doubtless saved us from defeat on countless occasions, have not by any means rendered us immune from attack, he explained. For so great is the wealth of Guthol's diamond treasury that there yet may be found those who will risk almost certain defeat in an effort to loot our unconquered city. So thus we find occasional practice in the exercise of arms. But there is more to Gothol than the mountain city. My country extends from Paludona, the equator, north 10 carads from the 10th carad west of Horse to the 20th west, including thus 1,000,000 square haads, the greater proportion of which is fine grazing land where run our great herds and thoats and zatitters. Surrounded as we are by predatory enemies, our herdsmen must indeed be warriors, or we should have no herds, and you may be assured that they get plenty of fighting. Then there is our constant need of workers in the mines. The Gotholians consider themselves a race of warriors, and as such prefer not to labor in the mines. The law is, however, that each male Gotholian shall give an hour a day in labor to the government. That is practically the only tax that is levied upon them. They prefer, however, to furnish a substitute to perform this labor, and as our own people will not hire out for labor in the mines, it has been necessary to obtain slaves. And I do not need to tell you that slaves are not won without fighting. We sell these slaves in public market, the proceeds going half and half to the government and the warriors who bring them in. The purchasers are credited with the amount of labor performed by their particular slaves. At the end of the year, a good slave will have performed the labor tax of his master for 6 years, and if slaves are plentiful, he is freed and permitted to return to his own people. You fight in platinum and diamonds? Asked Tara, indicating his gorgeous trappings with a quizzical smile. Gahan laughed. We are a vain people, he admitted good-naturedly. It is, and it is possible that we place too much value on personal appearances. We vie with one another in a splendor of our accoutrements, entrapped for the observance of the lighter duties of life. Though when we take the field, our leather is the plainest I have ever seen worn by fighting men of Barsoom. We pride ourselves too upon our physical beauty, and especially upon the beauty of our women. May I dare to say, Tara of Helium, that I am hoping for the day that you will visit Guthol, that my people may see one who is really beautiful. The women of Helium are taught to frown with displeasure upon the tongue of a flatterer, rejoined the girl. But Gahan, Jed of Guthol, observed that she smiled as she said it. A bugle sounded clear and sweet above the laughter and the talk. The dance of Barsoom! Exclaimed the young warrior. I claim you for it, Tara of Helium. The girl glanced at the direction of the bench where she had last seen Jorkantos, and he was not in sight. She inclined her head to assent to the claim of the Gutholian. Slaves were passing among the guests, distributing small musical instruments of a single string. Upon each instrument were characters which indicated the pitch and length of its tone. The instruments were of skeel, the string of gut, and were shaped to fit the left forearm of the dancer, to which it was strapped. There was also a ring wound with gut, which was worn between the first and second joints of the index finger of the right hand, and which, when pressed over the string of the instrument, elicited a single note required of the dancer. The guests had risen and were slowly making their way towards the expanse of the scarlet sward at the south end of the gardens where the dance was to be held, when Jorkantos came hurriedly towards Tara of Helium. I claim, he exclaimed as he neared her, but she interrupted him with a gesture. You are too late, Jorkantos, she cried, in mock anger. No laggard may claim Tara of Helium. Now haste, but haste now, lest thou lose also Olivia Marthas, whom I have never seen wait too long to be claimed for this or any other dance. I have already lost her, admitted Jorkantos ruefully. And you mean to say that you came for Tara of Helium, only after losing Olivia Marthas, demanded the girl, still simulating displeasure. Oh, Tara of Helium, you know better than that, insisted the young man. Was it not natural that I should assume that you would accept me, who alone has claimed you for the dance of Barsoom for the last 12 times past? And sit and play with my thumbs until you saw fit to come for me? She questioned. No, Jorkantos, Tara of Helium is for no laggard. And she threw him a sweet smile and passed on toward the assembling dancers with Gahan, Jed of Fargothol. The dance of Barsoom bears a relation similar to the more formal dancing functions of Mars that the Grand March does to ours. Though it is infinitely more intricate and more beautiful, before a Martian youth of either sex may attend an important social function where there is dancing, he must have become proficient in at least three dances: the dance of Barsoom, his national dance, and the dance of his city. In these three dances, the dancers furnish their own music, which never varies, nor do the steps or figures vary, having been handed down from time immemorial. All Barsoomian dances are stately and beautiful, but the dance of Barsoom is a wondrous epic of motion and harmony. There is no grotesque posturing, no vulgar or suggestive movements. It has been described as the interpretation of the highest ideals of the world that aspired to grace and beauty, and chastity in women, and strength and dignity and loyalty in man. Today, John Carter, warlord of Mars, with Dejah Thoris, his mate, led in the dancing. And if there was another couple that vied with them in possession of the silent admiration of its guest, it was the resplendent Jed of Gothol and his beautiful partner. In the ever-changing figures of the dance, the men found themselves now with the girl's hand in his, and again with the arm about the lithe body that the jeweled harness but inadequately covered. And the girl, though she had danced 1,000 dances in the past, realized for the first time the personal contact of the man's arm against her naked flesh. It troubled her that she should notice it, and she looked up questioningly and almost with displeasure at the man as though it was his fault. Their eyes met, and she saw in his that which she had never seen in the eyes of Jorkantos. It was at that very end of the dance that they both stopped suddenly with the music and stood there looking straight into each other's eyes. It was Gahan of Gothol who spoke first. Tara of Helium, I love you, he said. The girl drew herself into full height. The Jed of Gothol forgets himself, she exclaimed haughtily. The Jed of Gothol would forget everything but you, Tara of Helium, he replied. Fiercely he pressed the soft hand that still retained from the last position of his dance. I love you, Tara of Helium, he repeated. Why should your ears refuse to hear what your eyes but just now did not refuse to see? And answer? What meanest thou? She cried. Are the men of Gothor such boors then? They are neither boors nor fools, he replied quietly. They know when they love a woman, and when she loves them. Tara of Helium stamped her little foot in anger. Go, she said, before it's necessary to acquaint my father with the dishonor of his guests. She turned and walked away. Wait, cried the man, just another word. Of apology? She asked. Of prophecy, he said. I do not care to hear it, replied Tara of Helium, and left him standing there. She was strangely unstrung, and shortly thereafter returned to her own quarter of the palace, where she stood for a long time by a window looking out beyond the scarlet toward the greater Helium, toward the northwest. Presently she turned away, angrily. I hate him, she exclaimed aloud. Whom? inquired the privileged Euthia. Tara of Helium stamped her foot. That ill-mannered boor, the Jet of Gathol, she replied. Euthia raised her slim brows. After the stamping of the little foot, a great beast rose from one corner of the room and crossed to Tara of Helium, where it stood looking up into her face. She placed her hand upon the ugly head. Dear old Woola, she said, no love could be deeper than yours, yet it never offends. Would that man might pattern themselves after you. Yeesh. Brangus, it is good to see you, my brother. How are you doing tonight? Philosophy, how you doing? Currently in bed. Those are at a blast. They informed me on Wednesday. They, they have children's book reading sessions, so he's looking forward to it. Let's go. Uh, that's a pretty cool story premise right there. As we never have a normal day either, but we take it one day at a time and see what happens. Exactly. Exactly. Doing well, sir. Good. I'm glad to hear it. Seems the stream is working a little bit better tonight. We are now where we were when we had to stop last time, so appreciate you all listening again to what we missed the first time. Dropping a leg before heading to bed. Amanda, appreciate you. Hope you enjoy your sleep and have a beautiful rest of your night. Yes, thank you. Members, he kept her from Nana and I. He's amazing brother and cousin. Aw, super sweet. He's such a good kid. I love Leighton. And thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you. Let's get into chapter 2. At the Gale's Mercy. Tara of Helium did not return to her father's guests, but awaited in her own apartments the word from Jorcantos, which she knew must come, begging her to return to the gardens. She would then refuse, haughtily, but no appeal came from Jorcantos. At first Tara of Helium was angry, then she was hurt, and always she was puzzled. She could not understand. Occasionally she thought of the Jet of Gathol, and then she would stamp her foot. For she was very angry indeed with Gahan. The presumption of the man. He had insinuated that he read love for him in her eyes. Never had she been so insulted and humiliated. Never had she so thoroughly hated a man. Suddenly she turned toward Euthia. My flying leather, she commanded. But the guests, exclaimed the slave girl. Your father, the warlord, will expect you to return. He will be disappointed, snapped Tara of Helium. The slave hesitated. He does not approve of your flying alone, she reminded her mistress. The young princess sprang to her feet and seized the unhappy slave by the shoulder, shaking her. You are becoming unbearable, Euthia, she cried. Soon there will be no alternative than to send you to the public slave market. Then possibly you will find a master of your liking. Tears came to the soft eyes of the slave girl. It is because I love you, my princess, she said softly. Tara of Helium melted. She took the slave in her arms and kissed her. I have the disposition of a thoat, Euthia, she said. Forgive me, I love you, and there is nothing that I would not do for you, and nothing would I do to harm you. Again, as I have so often in the past, I offer you your freedom. I do not wish my freedom if it will separate me from you, Tara of Helium, replied Euthia. I am happy here with you. I think that I should die without you. Again the girls kissed. And you will not fly alone, then? questioned the slave. Tara of Helium laughed and pinched her companion. You persistent little pest, she cried. Of course I shall fly. Does Tara of Helium always do that which pleases her? Euthea shook her head sorrowfully. Alas, she does, she admitted. Iron is the warlord of Barsoom to the influences of all but two. In the hands of Dejah Thoris and Tara of Helium, he is a potter's clay. Then run and fetch my flying leather like a sweet slave you are, directed the mistress. Far out across the ochre sea bottoms beyond the twin cities of Helium raced the swift flyer of Tara of Helium. Thrilling to the speed and the buoyancy of the obedience of the little craft, the girl drove toward the northwest. She should have chose Why she should choose that direction she did not pause to consider, perhaps because in that direction lay the less known areas of Barsoom, and ergo romance, mystery, and adventure. In that direction also lay far Gothol, but to that fact she gave no conscious thought. She did, however, think occasionally of the Jed of that distant kingdom, but the reaction to these thoughts was scarcely pleasurable. They still brought the flush of shame to her cheeks, and a surge of angry blood to her heart. She was very angry with the Jed of Gothol, and though she would never see him again, she was quite sure the hate of him would remain fresh in her memory forever. Mostly her thoughts revolved around the other, Jor Kantos. And when she thought of him, she thought also of Olivia Marthas of Hastor. Tara of Helium thought that she was jealous of the fair Olivia, and it made her very angry to think that. She was angry with Jor Kantos and herself, but she was not angry at all with Olivia Marthas, whom she loved, and so of course she was not jealous really. The trouble was that Tara of Helium had failed for once to have her own way. Jor Kantos did not come running like a willing slave when she had expected him, and here was the nub of the whole thing. Gahan, Jed of Gothol, a stranger, had been a witness to her humiliation. He had seen her unclaimed at the beginning of the great function, and he had to come to rescue her and to save her, as he doubtless thought, from the inglorious fate of the wallflower. At the recurring thought, Tara of Helium could feel her whole body burning with scarlet shame, and then she went suddenly white and cold with rage, whereupon she turned her flyer about so abruptly that she was all but torn from her lashings upon the flat, narrow deck. She reached home just before dark. The guests had departed. Quiet had descended upon the palace. An hour later she joined her father and mother at the evening meal. You deserted us, Tara of Helium, said John Carter. It is not what the guests of John Carter would expect. They did not come to see me, replied Tara of Helium. I did not ask them. They were no less your guests, replied her father. The girl rose and came and stood beside him and put her arms about his neck. My proper old Virginian, she said, rumpling the shock of black hair. In Virginia, you would be turned over your father's knee and spanked, said the man, smiling. She crept into his lap and kissed him. You do not love me any more? She announced. No one loves me. But she could not compose her features into a pout because a bubbling laughter insisted upon breaking through. The trouble is there are too many who love you, he said, and now there is another. Indeed? She cried. What do you mean? Gahan of Gothol has asked permission to woo you. The girl sat up straight and tilted her chin to the air. I would not wed with the walking diamond mine, she said. I will not have him. I told him as much, replied her father, and that you were as good as betrothed to another. He was very courteous about it, but at the same time he gave me to understand that he was accustomed to getting what he wanted, and that he wanted you very much. I suppose it will mean another war. Your mother's beauty kept Helium at war for many years, and, well, Tara of Helium, if I were a young man, I should doubtless be willing to set all of Barsoom afire to win you, as I still would to keep your divine mother. And he smiled across the Sorpus table, and its golden service at the undimmed beauty of Mars, most beautiful woman. Our little girl should not yet be troubled with such matters, said Dejah Thoris. Remember, John Carter, that you are not dealing with the Earth Child, whose span of life would be more than half completed before a daughter of Barsoom reached actual maturity. But do not the daughters of Barsoom sometimes marry as early as 20? He insisted. Yes, but they will still be desirable in the eyes of men after 40 generations of Earth folk have returned to dust. There is no hurry, at least, upon Barsoom. We do not fade and decay here as you tell me those of your planet do. though you, yourself, belay your own words. When the time seems proper, Tara of Helium shall wed with Jorcantos, and until then let us give no matter to further thought. No, said the girl. The subject irks me, and I shall not marry Jorcantos, or another. I do not intend to wed. Her father and mother looked at her and smiled. When Gahan of Gothol returns, he may carry you off, said the former. He has gone? Asked the girl. His flyer departs for Gothol in the morning, John Carter replied. I have seen the last of him then, remarked Tara of Helium with a sigh of relief. He says not, returned John Carter. The girl dismissed the subject with a shrug, and the conversation passed over other topics. A letter had arrived from Thuvia of Tharth, who was visiting her father's court while Carthoris, her mate, hunted in Okar. Word had been received that the Tharks and Warhoons were again at war, or rather that there had been an engagement, for war was their habitual state. In the memory of men, there had been no peace between these two savage green hordes, only a single temporary truce. Two new battleships had been launched in Hastor. A little band of holy Therns was attempting to revive the ancient and discredited religion of Isis, who they claimed still lived in spirit and had communicated with them. There were rumors of war from Dusar. A scientist claimed to have discovered human life on a further moon. A madman had attempted to destroy the atmosphere plant. 7 people had been assassinated in Greater Helium during the last 10 zodes, the equivalent of an Earth day. Following the meal, Deja Thoris and the Warlord played at Jatan, the Barsumian game of chess, which is played upon a board of 100 alternate black and orange squares. One player has 20 black pieces, the other 20 orange pieces. A brief description of the game may interest those Earth readers who care for chess, and will not be lost upon those who pursue this narrative to its conclusion, since before they are done they will find that a knowledge of the Jatan will add to the interest and the thrills that are in store for them. The men the men are placed upon the board as in chess upon the first 2 rows next to the player. In order from left to right on the line of the squares nearest the player, the Jatan pieces are warrior, padwar, dwar, flyer, chief, princess, flyer, dwar, padwar, warrior. In the next line, all were panthans, except the end pieces, which are called thoats and represent mounted warriors. The panthans, which are represented as warriors with 1 feather, may move 1 space in any direction except backwards. The thoats, mounted warriors with 3 feathers, may move 1 straight and 1 diagonal, and may jump intervening pieces. Warriors, foot soldiers, with 2 feathers, straight in any direction, or diagonal, 2 spaces. Padwars, lieutenants wearing 2 feathers, 2 diagonal in any direction, or combination. Dwarves, captains, wearing 3 feathers, 3 spaces straight in any direction, or combination. Flyers, represented by a propeller with 3 blades, 3 spaces in any direction, or combination, diagonally, and may jump intervening pieces. The chief, indicated by a diadem with 10 jewels, 3 spaces in any direction, straight or diagonal. Princess, diadem with a single jewel, same as chief, and can jump intervening pieces. The game is won when the player places any of his pieces on the same square with his opponent's princess, or when a chief takes a chief. It is drawn when a chief is taken by any opposing piece other than the opposing chief, or when both sides have been reduced to 3 pieces or less of equal value, and the game is not terminated in the following 10 moves. 5 pieces. This is but a general outline of the game, briefly stated. It was this game that Deja Thoris and John Carter were playing when Tara of Helium bid them good night, retiring to her own quarters and her sleeping silks and furs. Until morning, my beloved, she called back to them as she passed from the apartment, nor little did she guess, nor her parents, that this might indeed be the last time that they would ever set eyes upon her. The morning broke dull and gray. Ominous clouds billowed restlessly and low. Beneath them, torn fragments scudded towards the northwest. From her window, Tara of Helium looked out upon this unusual scene. Dense clouds seldom overcast the Barsumian sky. At this hour of the day it was her custom to ride one of those small thoats that has a saddle, that are the saddle animals of the Red Martians. But the sight of the billowing clouds lured her into a new adventure. Euthea still slept, and the girl did not disturb her. Instead, she dressed quietly and went into the hangar upon the roof of the palace directly above her quarters, where her own swift flyer was housed. She had never driven through the clouds. It was an adventure that always she had longed to experience. The wind was strong, and it was with difficulty that she maneuvered the craft from the hangar without accident. But once away, it raced swiftly out above the twin cities. The buffering winds caught it and tossed it, and the girl laughed aloud in sheer joy of the resilient thrills. She handled the little ship like a veteran, though few veterans would have faced the menace of such a storm in so light a craft. Swiftly she rose toward the clouds, racing with the scudding streamers of the storm-swept fragments, and a moment later she was swallowed by dense masses billowing above her. Here was a new world, a world of chaos, unpeopled except for herself. But it was a cold, damp, lonely world, and she found it depressing after the novelty of it had been dissipated by an overpowering sense of the magnitude of the forces surging about her. Suddenly she felt very lonely, and very cold, and very little. Hurriedly, therefore, she rose until presently her craft broke through into the glorious sunlight that transformed the upper surface of the somber element into rolling masses of varnished silver. Here it was still cold, but without the dampness of the clouds, and in the eye of the brilliant sun her spirits rose with the mounting needle of her altimeter. Gazing at the clouds, now far beneath, the girl experienced the sensation of hanging stationary in the mid-heaven. But the whirring of her propeller and the wind beating upon her, the high figure that rose and fell beneath the glass of her speedometer, these told her that her speed was terrific. It was then that she determined to turn back. The first attempt she made above the clouds, but it was unsuccessful, and to her surprise she discovered that she could not even turn against the high wind, which rocked and buffeted the frail craft. Then she dropped swiftly to the dark, wind-swept zone beneath the hurtling clouds and the gloomy surface of the shadowed ground. Here she tried again to force the nose of the flyer back towards helium, but the tempest seized the frail thing and hurled it remorselessly about, rolling it over and over and tossing it as if it were a cork in a cataract. It's a good one. At last the girl succeeded in rightening the flyer, perilously close to the ground. Never before had she been so close to death, yet she was not terrified. Her coolness had saved her. That, and the strength of her deck lashing that held her. Traveling with the storm, she was safe, but where was it bearing her? She pictured the apprehension of her father and mother when she failed to appear in the morning meal. They would find her flyer missing, and they would guess that somewhere in the path of the storm it lay a wrecked and tangled mass upon her dead body. And then brave men would go out in search of her, risking their lives, and that lives would be lost in search, she knew, for she realized now that never in her lifetime had such a tempest raged upon Barsoom. She must turn back. She must reach helium before her mad lust for thrills had cost the sacrifice of a single courageous life. She determined that greater safety and likelihood of success lay above the clouds, and once again she rose through the chilling, wind-tossed vapor. Her speed again was terrific, for the wind seemed to have increased rather than to have lessened. She sought gradually to check the swift flight of her craft, but though she finally succeeded in reversing her motor, the wind but carried her on as it would. Then it was that Tara of Helium lost her temper. Had her world not always bowed in acquiescence to her every wish? What were these elements, that they dared to thwart her? She would demonstrate to them that the daughter of the warlord was not to be denied. They would learn that Tara of Helium might not be ruled even by the forces of nature. And so she drove her motor forward again, and then with her firm, white teeth set a grim determination, she drove that steering lever far down to port with the intention of forcing the nose of her craft straight into the teeth of the wind. And the wind seized the frail thing and toppled it over upon its back and twisted and turned it and hurled it over and over. The propeller raced for an instant in the air pocket, and then the Tempest seized it again and twisted it from its shaft, leaving the girl helpless upon the unmanageable atom that rose and fell, and rolled and tumbled, the sport of the elements she had defied. Terror of helium. First sensation was one of surprise that she had failed to have her own way. Then she commenced to feel concern, not for her own safety, but for the anxiety of her parents and the dangers of the inevitable searchers must face. She reproached herself for the thoughtless selfishness that had jeopardized the peace and safety of others. She realized her own grave danger, too, but she was still unterrified. As befitted the daughter of Deja Thoris and John Carter, she knew that her buoyancy tanks might keep her afloat indefinitely, but she neither had food nor water, and she was being borne toward the less known area of Barsoom. Perhaps it would be better to land immediately and wait the coming of the searchers, rather than to allow herself be carried still further from helium, thus greatly reducing the chances of an early discovery. But when she dropped toward the ground, she discovered that the violence of the wind rendered an attempt to land tetramount to destruction, and she rose again rapidly. Carried along a few hundred feet above the ground, she was better able to appreciate the titanic proportions of the storm than when she had flown into the comparative century of the zone above the clouds. For now, she could distinctly see the effect of the wind upon the surface of Barsoom. The air was filled with dust and flying bits of vegetation, and when the storm carried her across the irrigated area of farming land, she saw great trees and stone walls and buildings lifted high in the air and scattered broadcast over the devastated country. And then she was carried swiftly on to other sights that forced in upon her consciousness a rapidly growing conviction that after all Tara of Helium was a very small and insignificant and helpless person. It was quite a shock of her self-pride when at last it was quite a shock to her self-pride while it lasted, and towards evening she was ready to believe that it was going to last forever. There had been no abatement of the ferocity of the tempest, nor was there any indication of any. She could only guess at the distance she had been carried, for she could not believe in the correctness of the high figures that had been piled upon the record of her odometer. They seemed unbelievable. And yet, had she known it, they were quite true. In 12 hours she had flown and been carried by the storm a full 7,000 haads. Just before dark she was carried over one of the deserted cities of ancient Mars. It was Torquas, but she did not know it. Had she, she might be readily been forgiven for abandoning the last vestige of hope, for to the people of Helium Torquas seemed as remote as do the South Sea Islands to us. And still the tempest, its fury unabated, bore her on. All that night she hurtled through the dark beneath the clouds, or rose to race through the moonlit void beneath the glory of Barsoomian's two satellites. She was cold and hungry and altogether miserable, but her brave little spirit refused to admit that her plight was hopeless even though reason proclaimed the truth. Her reply to reason sometimes spoke aloud in sudden defiance, recalled the Spartan stubbornness of her sire in the face of her certain annihilation. I still live. That morning there had been an early visitor at the palace of the warlord. It was Gahan, Jet of Gothol. He had arrived shortly after the absence of Tara of Helium had been noted, and in the excitement he had remained unannounced until John Carter had happened upon him in the great reception corridor of the palace as the warlord was hurrying out to arrange the dispatch of ships in search of his daughter. Gahan read the concern upon the face of the warlord. "Forgive me if I intrude, John Carter," he said, "but I came to ask the indulgence of another day, since it would be foolhardily to attempt to navigate a ship in such a storm." "Remain, Gahan, a welcome guest, until you choose to leave us," replied the warlord. "But you must forgive me in seeming inattention upon my part of Helium until my daughter is restored to us." "Your daughter restored? What do you mean?" exclaimed the Gotholian. "I do not understand." "She is gone, together with her light flyer. That is all we know. We could only assume that she decided to fly before the morning meal and was caught in the clutches of the tempest. You will pardon me, Gahan, if I leave you abruptly. I am arranging to send ships in search of her." But Gahan, Jet of Gothol, was already speeding in the direction of the palace gate. There he leapt upon a waiting thoat, and followed by two warriors in the metal of Gothol, he dashed through the avenues of Helium toward the palace that had been set aside for his entertainment. Whew. A large public action performed to show deep feelings like love and involves high effort and sacrifice to prove sincerity. What does grand gesture mean? My English isn't that great. Grand gesture, yes, that's exactly what it means. It is a large public action. Plenty of people live. I still live. Nana's 60th birthday is next. Ooh, chapter 3. The Headless Humans. Above the roof of the palace that housed the Jet of Guthol and his entourage, the cruiser Venator tore at her stout moorings. The groaning tackle bespoke the mad fury of the gale, while the worried faces of those members of the crew whose duties demanded their presence on the straining craft gave corroborative evidence of the gravity of the situation. Only stout lashings prevented these men from being swept from the deck, while those upon the roof below were constantly compelled to cling to rails and stanchions to save themselves from being carried away by each new burst of meteoric fury. Upon the prow of the Venator was painted the device of Guthol, and no pennants were displayed in the upper work since the storm had carried away several in rapid succession, just as it seemed to the watching man that it must carry away the ship itself. They could not believe that any tackle could withstand for long, this titanic force. To each of the 12 lashings clung a brawny warrior with drawn short sword. Had but a single mooring given to the power of the tempest, 11 short swords would have cut the others, since, practically moored, the ship was doomed, while free in the tempest it stood at least some slight chance for life. "By the blood of Isis, I believe they will hold," screamed one warrior to another. "And if they do not hold, may the spirits of our ancestors reward the brave warriors upon the Venator," replied another, for those upon the roof of the palace. "For it will not be long from the moment her cables part before her crew dons the leathers of the dead. But thus, Tanis, I believe they will hold. Give thanks, at least, that we will not sail before the tempest fell, since now each of us has a chance to live." "Yes," replied Tanis. "I should hate to be abroad today upon the stoutest ship that sails the Barsumian sky." It was then that Gahan the Jed appeared upon the roof. With him were the balances of his own party and a dozen warriors of Helium. The young chief turned to his followers. "I sail at once upon the Venator," he said, "in search of Tara of Helium, who is thought to have been carried away upon a one-man flyer by the storm. I do not need to explain to you the slender chances the Venator has to withstand the fury of the tempest, nor will I order you to your deaths. Let those who wish remain behind without dishonor. The others will follow me." And he leapt for the rope ladder that lashed wildly in the gale. The first man to follow him was Tanis, and when the last reached the deck of the cruiser, there remained upon the palace roof only the 12 warriors of Helium, who, with naked swords, had taken the post of the Gutholians at the moorings. Not a single warrior who had remained aboard the Venator would leave her now. "I expected no less," said Gahan, as with the help of those already on the deck, he and the others found secure lashings. The commander of the Venator shook his head. He loved his trim craft, the pride of her class in the little navy of Guthol. It was of her he thought, not of himself. He saw her lying torn and twisted upon the ochre vegetation of some distant sea bottom, to be presently overrun and looted by some savage green horde. He looked at Gahan. "Are you ready, Santothis?" asked the Jed. "All is ready." "Then cut away." Word was passed across the deck and over the side to the Heliomatic warriors below that at the third gun they were to cut away. 12 keen swords must strike simultaneously and with equal power, and each must sever completely in an instant 3 strands of heavy cable that no loose end fouling a block bring immediate disaster upon the Venator. Boom! The voice of the signal gun rolled down through the screaming wind to the 12 warriors upon the roof. Boom! 12 swords were raised above 12 brawny shoulders. Boom! 12 keen edges severed 12 complaining moorings clean and as one. The Venator, her propellers whirring, shot forward with the storm. The tempest struck her in the stern, and with a mailed fist it stood, the great ship upon her nose, and then it caught her and spun her as a child's top spins. And upon the palace roof the 12 men looked on in silent helplessness and prayed for the souls of the brave warriors who were going to their deaths. The others saw from Helium's lofty landing stages and from 1,000 hangars upon 1,000 roofs. But only for an instant did the preparations stop that would send another brave man to the frightful maelstrom of the apparent hopeless search, for such is the courage of the warriors of Barsoom. But the Venator did not fall to the ground within sight of the city at least, though though as long as the watchers could see her, never for an instant did she rest upon the even keel. Sometimes she lay upon one side or the other, or again she hurtled along keel up, or rolled over and over, and stood upon her nose or on tail, at the caprice of the great force that carried her along. And the watchers saw that this great ship was merely being blown away with the other bits of debris, great and small, that filled the sky. Never in the memory of men, or the annals or record history, had such a storm raged across the face of Barsoom. And in another instant was the Vanator forgotten as the lofty scarlet tower that had marked Lesser Helium for ages crashed to the ground, carrying death and demolition upon the city beneath. Panic reigned. A fire broke out in the ruins. The city's every force seemed crippled, and it was then that the warlord ordered the men that were about to set forth in search of Tower of Helium to devote their energies to the salvation of the city. For he too had witnessed the start of the Venator and realized the cruelty of wasting men who were needed sorely if Lesser Helium was to be saved from utter destruction. Shortly after noon of the second day the storm commenced to abate, and before the sun went down the little craft upon which Tara of Helium had hovered between life and death these many hours drifted slowly before a gentle breeze above a landscape of rolling hills that once had been lofty mountains upon the Martian continent. The girl was exhausted from loss of sleep, from lack of food and drink, and from the nervous reaction consequent to the terrifying experience through which she had passed. In the near distance, just topping an intervening hill, she caught the momentary glimpse of what appeared to be a dome-capped tower. Quickly, a dome-capped tower. Quickly, she dropped the flyer until the hill shut it off from view of the possible occupants of the structure she had seen. The tower meant to her the habitation of men, suggesting the presence of water and perhaps of food. If the tower was a deserted relic of a bygone age, she would scarcely find food there. But there was still a chance that there might be water. If it was inhabited, then must her approach be cautious, for only enemies might be expected to abide in so far distant a land. Tara of Helium knew that she must be far from the twin cities of her grandfather's empire. But had she guessed within even 1,000 haads of the reality, she had been stunned by realization of the utter hopelessness of her state. Keeping the craft low, for the buoyancy tanks were still intact, the girl skimmed the ground until a gently moving wind had carried her to the side of the last hill that intervened between her and the structure she had thought a man-built tower. Here she brought the flyer to the ground, among some stunted trees, and dragging it beneath where one might be somewhat hidden from the craft passing above, she made it fast and set forth to reconnoiter. Set forth to reconnoiter. Like most women of her class, she was armed only with a single slender blade, so that in such an emergency as now confronted her she must depend almost solely upon her cleverness in remaining undiscovered by enemies. With utmost caution she crept warily toward the crest of the hill, taking advantage of every natural scene that the landscape afforded to conceal her approach from possible observers ahead, while momentarily she cast quick glances rearward lest she be taken by surprise from that quarter. She came at last to the summit, where from the concealment of the low bush she could see what lay beyond. Beneath her spread a beautiful valley surrounded by low hills. Dotting it were numerous circular towers, dome-capped, and surrounding each tower was a stone wall enclosed several acres of the ground. The valley appeared to be in high state of cultivation. Upon the opposite side of the hill and just beneath her was a tower and enclosure. It was the roof of the former that had first attracted her attention. In all respect it seemed identical to the construction with those further out in the valley. A high, plastered wall of massive construction surrounding a similar constructed tower, upon whose gray surfaces was painted in vivid colors, a strange device. The towers were about 40 sofads in diameter, approximately 40 earth feet, and 60 in height to the base of the dome. To an Earth man, they would have immediately suggested the silos in which dairy farmers store ensilage for their herds. But closer scrutiny, revealing an occasional embrasured opening together with the strange construction of the domes, would have altered such a conclusion. Tara of Helium saw that the dome seemed to be faced with immeasurable prisms of glass, those that were exposed to the declining sun scintillating so gorgeously as to remind her suddenly of the magnificent trappings of Gahan of Gothol. As she thought of the man, she shook her head angrily and moved cautiously towards the forward a foot or two, that she might get a less obstructed view of the nearer tower and its enclosure. As Tara of Helium looked down into the enclosure surrounding the nearest tower, her brows contracted momentarily in frowning surprise, and then her eyes went wide in an expression of incredulity tinged with horror, for what she saw was a score or two of human bodies, naked and headless. For a long moment she watched, breathless, unable to believe the evidence of her own eyes, that these gruesome things moved and had life. She saw them crawling about on their hands and knees over and across one another, searching about with their fingers, and she saw some of them at throws for which the others seemed to be searching, and those at the throws were taking something from these receptacles and apparently putting it in a hole where their necks should have been. They were not far beneath her. She could see them distinctly, and she saw that there were the bodies of both men and women, and that they were beautifully proportioned, and that their skin was similar to hers, but of a slightly lighter red. At first, she had thought that she was looking upon the shambles, and that the bodies were. Uh, thought she was looking upon a shambles, and that the bodies, but recently decapitated, were moving under the impulse of muscular reaction. But presently she realized that this was their normal condition. The horror of them fascinated her, so that she could scarce take her eyes from them. It was evident from their groping hands that they were eyeless, from their sluggish movements uh, and their sluggish movements suggested a rudimentary nervous system and a correspondingly minute brain. The girl wondered how they subsided for. Sorry, this is all very weird. Wondered how they subsisted, for she could not, even by the wildest stretch of imagination, picture these imperfect creatures as intelligent tillers of the soil. Yet that the soil of the valley was tilled was evident, that these things had food was equally so. But who tilled the soil? Who kept and fed these unhappy things, and for what purpose? It was an enigma behind her powers in deduction. The sight of food aroused again, and conscious of her own gnawing hunger and the thirst that parched her throat. She could see both food and water within the enclosure, but would she dare enter, even should she find means of ingress? She doubted it, since the very thought of the possible contact with these gruesome creatures sent a shudder through her frame. Then her eyes wandered again out across the valley until presently they picked out what appeared to be a tiny stream winding its way through the center of the farmlands. A straight sight upon Barsoom. Ah, if it were but water, then might she hope with a real hope, for the fields would give her the sustenance for which she could gain by night, while by day she hid among the surrounding hills, and sometimes, yes, sometimes she knew, the searchers would come. For John Carter, warlord of Barsoom, would never cease to search for his daughter until every square hod of the planet had been combed again and again. She knew him, and she knew the warriors of Helium, and so she knew that she could but manage to escape harm until they came. She would indeed come at last, or they would indeed come at last. She would have to wait until dark before she dared venture into the valley, and in the meantime she thought it well to search out a place of safety nearby where she might be reasonably safe from the savage beasts. It was possible in the it was possible that the district was free from carnivora, but one might never be sure in a strange land. As she was about to withdraw behind the brows of a hill, her attention was again attracted by the enclosure below. Two figures had emerged from the tower. Their beautiful bodies seemed identical with those of the headless creatures among which they moved, but the newcomers were not headless. Upon their shoulders were heads that seemed human, yet which the girl intuitively sensed were not human. They were just a trifle too far away for her to see them distinctly in the waning light of the dying day, but she knew that they were too large. They were out of proportion to the perfectly proportioned bodies, and they were oblate in form. She could see that the men wore some manner of harness to which they slung the customary longsword and short sword of the Barsoomian warrior, and that their short necks were massive leather collars cut to fit closely over the shoulders and snugly to the lower part of the head. Their features were scarce discernible, but there was a suggestion of grotesqueness about them that carried to her the feeling of revulsion. The two carried a long rope, which they were fastened at intervals of about 2 sophods. What she later guessed were light manacles, for she saw the warriors passing among the poor creatures in the enclosure, and about the right wrist of each they fastened one of the manacles. When all had been thus fastened to the rope, one of the warriors commenced to pull and tug at the loose end as though attempting to drag the headless company toward the tower, while the other went among them with a long light whip which he flicked upon them upon the naked skin. Slowly, dully, the creatures rose to their feet, and between the tugging of the warrior in the front and the lashing from behind, the hopeless band was finally herded within the tower. Tara of Helium shuddered as she turned away. What manner of creatures were these? Suddenly it was night. The Barsoomian day had ended, and then a brief period of twilight that renders the transition from daylight to darkness almost as abrupt as the switching off of an electric light, and Tara of Helium was found no sanctuary. But perhaps there were no beasts to fear, or rather to avoid. Tara of Helium liked not the word fear. She would have been glad, however, had there been a cabin, even a very tiny cabin, upon her small flyer. But there was no cabin. The interior of the hull was completely taken up by the buoyancy tanks. Ah, she had it. How stupid of her not to have thought of it before. She could moor the craft to the tree beneath which it rested and let it rise the length of the rope. Lashed it to the deck rings, she would then be safe from any roaming beasts of prey that chanced along. In the morning she could drop to the ground again before the craft was discovered. Tara of Helium crept over the brow of the hill, down toward the valley. Her presence was hidden by the darkness of the night from the sight of any chance observer who might be loitering by the window or nearby tower. Cluros, the farther moon, Cluros, the farther moon was just rising above the horizon to commence its leisurely journey through the heavens. 8 zods later he would set, a trifle over 19 and a half Earth hours, and during that time Thuria, his vivacious mate, would have circled the planet twice and be more than halfway around on her third trip. She had but just set. It would be more than 3.5 hours before she shot above the opposite horizon to hurtle swift and low across the face of the dying planet. During this temporary absence of the mad moon, Tara of Helium hoped to find both food and water, and gain again the safety of her flyer's deck. She groped her way through the darkness, given the tower and its enclosure as wide a berth as possible. Sometimes she stumbled, for in long shadows cast by rising Cluros, objects were grotesquely distorted through the light from the moon, was still not sufficient to be much of assistance to her. Nor, as a matter of fact, did she want light. She could find the stream in the dark by a simple expedient of going down the hill until she walked into it, and she had seen the bearing trees and many crops grew throughout the valley, so that she would pass food in plenty ere she should reach the stream. If the moon showed her the way more clearly and thus saved her from the occasional fall, he would too show her more clearly to the strange denizens of the tower, and that, of course, must not be. Could she have waited until the following night, conditions would have been better, since Chloros would not appear in the heavens at all, and so, during Thuria's absence, utter darkness would reign. But the pangs of thirst and the gnawing of hunger could be endured no longer, with food and drink both in sight, and so she had to decide to risk discovery rather than suffer longer. Safely past the nearest tower, she moved as rapidly as she felt consistent with safety, choosing her way wherever possible so that she might take advantage of the shadows of the trees that grew at intervals and at the same time discover those which bore fruit. In this latter she met with almost immediate success, for the very third tree behind which she had halted was very, very heavy with ripe fruit. Never thought Tara of Helium had aught so delicious impinged upon her palate that yet it was naught else than the almost tasteless usa, which was considered to be palatable only after having been cooked and highly spiced. It grows easily within little irrigation, and the trees bear abundantly. The fruits, which ranks high in food value, is one of the staple foods of the less well-to-do, and because of this cheapness, the nutritive value forms one of the principal rations of both armies and navies upon Barsoom, a use which has won for it a Martian sobriquet, which, freely translated into English, would be the fighting potato. The girl was wise enough to eat but sparingly, but she filled her pocket pouch with the fruit before she continued upon her way. Two towers she passed before she came at last to the stream, and here again was she temperate, drinking but little, eh, drinking but little, and that very slowly, contenting herself with rinsing her mouth frequently and bathing her face, her hands, and her feet. And even though the night was cold, as Martian nights are, the sensation of refreshment more than compensated for the physical discomfort of her low temperature. Replacing her sandals, she sought among the growing track near the stream for whenever edible berries or tubers might be planted there, and found a couple of varieties that could be eaten raw. With these she replaced some of her usa in her pocket pouch, not only to ensure the variety, but because she found them more palatable. Occasionally she returned to the stream to drink, but each time moderately. Always were her eyes and ears alert for the first signs of danger, but she had neither seen nor heard aught to disturb her, and presently the time approached when she felt she must return to her flyer lest she be caught in the revealing light of the low-swinging Thuria. She dreaded leaving the water, for she knew that she must become very thirsty before she could hope to come again to the stream. If she only had some little receptacle in which to carry water, even a small amount would tide her over until the following night. But she had nothing, and so she must content herself as best she could with the juices of the fruit and tubers that she had gathered. After the last drink at the stream, the longest and deepest she had allowed herself, she rose to retrace her steps toward the hills. But even as she did so, she became suddenly tense with apprehension. What was that? She could have sworn that she saw something move in the shadows beneath the tree not far away. For a long moment the girl did not move. She scarce breathed. Her eyes remained fixed upon the dense shadows below the tree. Her ears strained through the silence of the night. A low moaning came down from the hills where her flyer was hidden. She knew it well, the weird note of a hunting banth, and the great carnivore lay directly in her path. But he was not so close as this other thing, hiding there in the shadows just a little way off. What was it? It was the strain of uncertainty that weighed heaviest upon her. Had she known the nature of the creature lurking there, half its menace would have vanished. She cast quickly about her in search of some haven of refuge should the thing prove dangerous. Again rose the moaning from the hills, but this time closer. Almost immediately it was answered from the opposite side of the valley behind her, and then from the distance to the right of her, and twice upon her left her eyes had found a tree quite near. Slowly and without taking her eyes from the shadows of the other tree, she moved toward the overhanging branches that might afford her sanctuary in the event of need. And at her first move a low growl rose from the spot she had been watching, and she heard the sudden moving of a big body. Simultaneously, the creature shot into the moonlight, in full charge upon her, its tail erect, its tiny ears laid flat, its great mouth with its multiple rows of sharp teeth and powerful fangs, already yawning for its prey, its 10 legs carrying it forward in great leaps, and now from the beast's throat issued a frightful roar, with which it seeks to paralyze its prey. It was a banth, a great maned lion of Barsoom. Tara of Helium saw it coming and leaped for a tree toward which she had been moving, and the banth realized her intention and redoubled its speed. As his hideous roar awakened the echoes in the hills, so too it awakened echoes in the valley, but these echoes came from the living throats of others of its kind, until it seemed to the girl that fate had thrown her into the midst of countless multitude of these savage beasts. Almost incredibly swift as the speed of a charging banth, and fortunate it was that the girl had not been caught farther in the open. As it was, her margin of safety was next to negligible. As she swung nimbly to the lower branches, the creature in pursuit of her crashed among the foliage, almost upon her, as it sprang upward to seize her. It was only a combination of good fortune and agility that saved her. A stout branch deflected the raking talons of the carnivore, but so close was the call that a giant forearm brushed her flesh in the instant before she scrambled to the higher branches. Baffled, the banth gave vent to its rage and disappointment in a series of frightful roars that caused the very ground to tremble, and to these were added the roarings and growlings and moanings of its fellows as they approached from every direction, in the hope of wresting from him whatever his kill they could take by craft or by prowess. And now he turned snarling upon them as they circled the tree, while the girl, huddled in a crouch above them, looked down upon the gaunt yellow monsters padding on noiseless feet in the restless circle about her. She wondered now at the strange freak of fate that had permitted her to come down this far into the valley by night unharmed. But even more she wondered how she was to return to the hills. She knew that she would not dare to venture it by night, and she guessed too that by day she might be confronted by even greater perils. To depend upon this valley for sustenance she now saw to be beyond the pale of plausibility, because of the banths that would keep her from food and water by night, while the dwellers in the towers would doubtless make it equally impossible for her to forage by day. There was but one solution of her difficulty, and that was to return to her flyer and pray that the wind would waft her to some less terrible land. But when might she return to the flyer? The banths gave little evidence of relinquishing hope for her. And even if they wandered out of sight, would she dare risk the attempt? She doubted it. Hopeless indeed seemed her situation, and hopeless it was. Whoo! Hey, Void, how's it going? Been a minute. Big move from Florida to New York. Bit busted up and broken after having a seizure on top of steps. Get out of here. And I'm sorry to hear that. I love that you're back there too. Excellent. Congratulations. Full flight of stairs. Yeah, it wasn't fun. Yeah, I can't even imagine. Hey, Sean Bowden, how's it going? Well, thanks, Jesse. I'm curious if I'm getting you as excited about Barsoom as I am about Narnia. This girl's crazy. She takes just after her father. I'm just going to say that. Let's see. Sean. Narnia has my heart. I know, I know. I'm just kidding. All right, 14 likes thus far. We're right on par here. Got about 20 minutes left typically. These chapters are long, but I think we can get through chapter 4 at least. So we'll do the prelude in 4 chapters, and then we'll call it good after chapter 4. I'll fix the stream title. I'm really glad that it's deciding to not buffer as much as it was last Monday. So, oops, someone forgot to like. Appreciate you, Jesse. Let's get into our last. Oh, of course, of course. This should be a good one to end on, which is chapter 4, Captured. I wonder what happens to her. Nietzsche? Oh no, thank you. In fact, I'll always remember the time I started reading a book and I was like, these chapters are long. It's because it was literally one chapter was the whole book. It said chapter one, and then he wrote the whole book. Chapter four, captured. I'm just gonna look real quick. Okay. And can I just say, like the headless bodies, that whole thing was weird. I'm very curious about it. What a troll thing to do, right? Even I have reread each paragraph he wrote. Yeah? Ah, Nietzsche. Chapter 4, Captured. As Thuria, swift racer of the night, shot again into the sky, the scene changed. As by magic, a new aspect fell athwart the face of nature. It was, uh, it was as though, in an instant, one had been transported from one planet to another. It was the age-old miracle of the Martian nights that is always new, even to Martians. Two moons resplendent in the heavens, where one had been but now conflicting, vast changing shadows that altered the very hills themselves. Far Clearos, stately, majestic, almost stationary, shedding its light upon every world below. Thuria, a great and glorious orb swinging swift across the vaulted dome of the blue-black night, so low that she seems to graze the hills. A gorgeous spectacle that held the girl now beneath the spell of its enchantment, as it always had and always would. Ah, Thuria, the mad queen of heaven, murmured Tara of Helium. The hills pass in stately procession, their bosoms rising and falling. The trees move in restless circles, the little grasses describe their little arcs, and all is movement, restless, mysterious movement, without sound, while Thuria passes. The girl sighed and let her gaze fall again to the stern realities beneath. There was no mystery in the huge banths. He who had discovered her squatted there, looking hungrily up at her. Most of the others had wandered away in search of other prey, but a few remained, hoping yet to bury their fangs in that soft body. The night wore on. Again Thuria left the heavens to her lord and master, hurrying on her keep, her tryst with the sun in other skies. But a single banth waited impatiently beneath the tree, which harbored Tara of Helium. The others had left, but their roars and growls and moans thundered or rumbled or floated back to her from near and far. What prey found they in this little valley? There must be something that they were accustomed to find here that they should be drawn in such great numbers. The girl wondered what it could be. How long the night, numb, cold, and exhausted, Tara of Helium clung onto the tree in growing desperation, for once she had dozed and almost fallen. Hope was low in her brave little heart. How much more could she endure? She asked herself the question, and then, with a brave shake of her head, she squared her shoulders. I still live, she said aloud. The banth looked up and growled. Came Thuria again, and after a while the great sun, a flaming lover pursuing its heart's desires, and Cluros, a cold husband, continued its serene way, as placid as before his house had been violated by its hot Lothario. And now the sun and both moons rode together in the sky, leading their far mysteries to make weird the Martian dawn. Tara of Helium looked out across the fair valley that spread upon all sides of her. It was rich and beautiful, but even as she looked upon it, she shuddered, for to her mind came a picture of the headless things that the towers and walls hid. Those by day and banths by night. Ah, was it any wonder that she shuddered? With the coming of the sun, the great Barsoomian lion rose to his feet. He turned angrily eyes upon the girl above him, voiced a single ominous growl, and slunk away towards the hills. The girl watched him, and she saw that he gave the towers as wide a berth as possible, and that he never took his eyes from one of them, and while he was passing it. Evidently the inmates have taught these savage creatures to respect them. Presently he passed from sight in the narrow defile, nor in any direction that she could see was there another. Momentarily, at least, the landscape was deserted. The girl wondered if she had dared to attempt to regain the hill and her flyer. She dreaded the coming of the workmen to the fields, as she was so sure they would come. She shrank from again seeing the headless bodies and found herself wondering if these things would come out into the fields and work. Wondering. She looked toward the nearest tower. There was no sign of life there. The valley lay quiet now and deserted. She lowered herself stiffly to the ground. Her muscles were cramped, and every move brought a twinge of pain. Pausing a moment to drink again at the stream, she felt refreshed and then turned without more delay toward the hills. To cover the distance as quickly as possible seemed the only plan to pursue. The trees no longer offered concealment, and so she did not go out of her way to be near them. The hills seemed very far away. She had not thought the night before that she had traveled so far. Really had not been far, but now, with the three towers to pass in broad daylight, the distance seemed great indeed. The second tower lay almost directly in her path. To make a detour would not lessen the chance of detection. It would only lengthen the period of her danger, and so she laid her course straight for the hills where her flyer was, regardless of the tower. As she passed the first enclosure, she thought that she had heard the sound of movement within, but the gate did not open, and she breathed more easily when it lay behind her. She came then to the second enclosure, the outer wall of which she must circle. As it lay across her route, as she passed close along it, she distinctly heard not only movement within, but voices. In the world language of Barsoom, she heard a man issuing instructions. So many were to pick Usa, so many were to pick Usa, so many were to irrigate this field, so many were to cultivate that, and so on, as a foreman lay out a day's work for his crew. Tara of Helium had just reached the gate of the outer wall. Without warning, it swung open towards her. She saw that for a moment it would hide her from those within, and in that moment she turned and ran, keeping close to the wall until passing out of sight beyond the curve of the structure. She came to the opposite side of the enclosure. Here, panting from her exertion and from the excitement of her narrow escape, she threw herself among some tall weeds and grew close to a foot of the wall. She There she lay trembling for some time, not even daring to rise a head out to look about. Never before had Tara of Helium felt a paralyzing effects of terror. She was shocked and angry with herself that she, daughter of John Carter, warlord of Barsoom, should exhibit fear. Not even the fact that there had been none there to witness it lessened her shame and anger, and the worst of it, she knew that under similar circumstances she would again be equally as craven. It was not the fear of death, she knew that. No, it was the thought of those headless bodies and that she might see them and that they might even touch her, lay hands upon her, seize her. She shuddered and trembled at the thought. After a while she gained sufficient command of herself to raise her head to look about. To her horror, she discovered that everywhere she looked she saw people working in the fields or preparing to do so. Workmen were coming from other towers, little bands were pausing to this field and that. They were even some already at work within 30 ads of her. About 100 yards, uh, there were even some already at work within 30 ads of her, which is about 100 yards. There were 10, perhaps, in a party nearest to her, both men and women, and all were beautiful of form and grotesque of face. So meager were their trappings that they were practically naked, a fact that was in no way remarkable among the tillers of the field of Mars. Even each wore the particular high leather collar that completely hid the neck, and each wore sufficient other leather to support a single sword and his pocket pouch. The leather was very old and worn, showing long, hard service, and was absolutely plain with the exception of a single device upon the left shoulder. The heads, however, were covered with ornaments of precious metals and jewels, so that little more than eyes, nose, and mouth were discernible. These were hideously inhuman, and yet grotesquely human at the same time. The eyes were far apart and protruding, the nose scarce more than two small parallel slits set vertically above a round hole that was the mouth. The heads were peculiarly repulsive, so much so that they seemed unbelievable to the girl that they formed an integral part of the beautiful bodies below them. So fascinated was Tara of Helium that she could scarce take her eyes from the strange creatures, a fact that was so proof to her undoing, for in order that she might see them she was forced to expose a part of her own head, and presently, to her consternation, she saw one of the creatures had stopped his work and was staring directly at her. She did not dare to move, for it was still possible that the thing had not seen her, or at least was only suspicious that some creature lay hid among the weeds. If she should allay this suspicion by remaining motionless, the creature might believe that he had been mistaken and return to his work. But alas, such was not the case. She saw the thing call the attention of others to her, and almost immediately 4 or 5 of them started to move in her direction. It was impossible now to escape discovery. Her only hope lay in flight. If she could elude them and reach the hills and the flyer ahead of them, she might escape, and that she could be accompanied by she could and that could be accomplished in but one way: flight, immediate and swift. Leaping to her feet, she darted along the base of the wall, which she must skirt to the opposite side, beyond which lay the hill that was her goal. Her act was greeted by strange whistling sounds from other things behind her, and casting a glance over her shoulder, she saw them all in rapid pursuit. There were also shrill commands that she halt, but to these she paid no attention. Before she had half circled the enclosure, she discovered that her chances for successful escape were great, since it was evident to her that the pursuers were not so fleet as she. High indeed, then, were her hopes as she came in sight of the hill, but they were soon dashed by what lay before her. For there, in the fields that lay between them, were fully 100 creatures similar to those behind her, and all were on alert, evidently warned by the whistling of their fellows. Instructions and commands were shouted to and fro, with the result that those before her spread roughly into great half a circle to intercept her, and when she turned to the right, hoping to elude the net, she saw others coming from fields beyond, and to the left the same was true. But Tara of Helium would not admit defeat. Without once pausing, she turned directly toward the center of the advancing semicircle, beyond which lay her single chance of escape. And as she ran, she drew her long, slim dagger, like her valiant sire. If die she must, she would die fighting. There were gaps in the thin line confronting her, and toward the widest of one of these she directed her course. The things on either side of the opening guessed her intent, for they closed in to paste themselves in her path. This widened the openings on other sides of them, and as the girl appeared almost to rush into their arms, she turned suddenly at right angles, ran swiftly to new direction for a few yards, and then dashed quickly toward the hill again. Now only a single warrior with a wide gap on either side of him barred her clear way to freedom. Though all the others were speeding as rapidly as they could to intercept her, if she could just pass this one without too much delay, she could escape. If that she was certain. Of that she was certain. Her every hope hinged on this. The creature before her realized it too, for he moved cautiously, though swiftly, to intercept her, as a rugby fullback might maneuver in the realization that he alone stood between the opposing team and a touchdown. At first Tara of Helium had hoped that she might dodge him, for she could not but guess that she was not only more fleet, but infinitely more agile than these strange creatures. But soon there came to her realization that in the time consumed in the attempt to elude his grasp, his nearer followers would be upon her and escape then impossible. So she chose instead to charge straight for him. And when he guessed her direction, he stood, half crouching with outstretched arms, awaiting her. In one hand was his sword, but a voice arose, crying in tones of authority, "Take her alive! Do not harm her!" Instantly the fellow returned his sword to its scabbard, and then Tara of Helium was upon him. Straight for that beautiful body she sprang, and in an instant that the arms closed to seize her, sharp blade drove deep into the naked chest. The impact hurled them both to the ground, and as Tara of Helium sprang to her feet again, she saw, to her horror, that the loathsome head had rolled from the body and was now crawling away from her on 6 short spider-like legs. The body struggled spasmodically and lay still, as brief as had been the delay caused by the encounter. It still had been of sufficient duration to undo her, for even as she rose 2 more of the things fell upon her, and instantly therefore she was surrounded. Her blade sank once more into naked flesh, and once more a head rolled free and crawled away. Then they overpowered her, and in another moment she was surrounded by fully 100 of the creatures, all seeking to lay hands upon her. At first she thought that they had wished to tear her to pieces in revenge for her having slain 2 of their fellows, but presently she realized that they were prompted more by curiosity than by any sinister motive. "Come," said one of their captors, both of whom had retained a hold upon her. As he spoke, he tried to lead her away with him toward the nearest tower. "She belongs to me," cried the other. "Did I not capture her? She will come with me to the Tower of Moak." Never, insisted the first. She is lewd's. To lewd I will take her. To whoever interferes may feel the keenness of my sword. In the head. He almost shouted the last three words. Come, enough of this, cried one who spoke with some show of authority. She was captured in Lewd's field. She will go to Lewd. She was discovered in Moak's field, at the very foot of the tower in Moak, insisted the one who had claimed her from Moak. You have heard the Nalak speak, cried the Lewd. It shall be as he says. Not while this Moak holds a sword, replied the other. Rather will I cut her in twain and take my half to Moak than to relinquish her all to Lewd. And he drew his sword, or rather he laid his hands upon his hilt in a threatening gesture. But before he could even draw it, the lute had whipped out his own, and with fearful blow cut deep into the head of his adversary. Instantly the big round head collapsed, almost as if punctured balloon collapses. As a grayish semi-fluid matter spurted from it, the protruding eyes, apparently lidless, merely stared. The sphincter-like muscle of the mouth opened and closed, and then the head toppled from the body to the ground. The body stood dully for a moment, and then slowly started wander aimlessly about until one of the others seized it by the arm. One of the two heads crawling about on the ground now approached. This Rykor belongs to Moak, it said. I am Moak. I am a Moak. I will take it. And without further discussion, it commenced to crawl up the front of the headless body, using its 6 short spider-like legs and 2 stout cheileh, which grew just in its front legs and strongly reassembled those of the earthly lobster. Except that they were both of the same size. The body, in the meantime, stood in passive indifference, its arms hanging idly by its side. Its head climbed to its shoulders and settled itself inside the leather collar that now hid its cheileh and legs. Almost immediately, the body gave evidence of intelligent animation. It raised its hands and adjusted the collar more comfortably. It took the head between its palms and settled it in place, and when it moved around, it did not wander aimlessly, but instead its steps were firm and to some purpose. The girl watched all these things in growing wonder, and presently no other of the Mohawks seemed to incline to dispute the right to lewd to her. She was led off by her captor toward the nearest tower. Several accompanied them, including the one who carried the loose head under his arm. The head that was being carried conversed with the head upon the shoulders of the thing that had carried it. Tower of Helium shivered. It was horrible. All that she had seen, these frightful creatures, was horrible, and to be a prisoner wholly in their power. Shadow of her first ancestor, what had she done to deserve so cruel a fate? At the wall enclosing the tower, they paused while one opened the gate, and when they passed within the enclosure, which, to the girl's horror, she found filled with headless bodies, the creature who carried the bodiless head now set its burden upon the ground, and the latter immediately crawled toward one of the bodies that was lying nearby. Some wandered stupidly to and fro, but this one lay still. It was a female. The head crawled to it and made its way to the shoulders, where it settled itself. At once the body sprang lightly erect. Another of those who had accompanied them from the fields approached with the harness and collar that had been taken from the dead body that the head had formerly topped. The new body now appropriated these, and the heads deftly adjusted them. The creature was now as good as before Tara of Helium had struck it down its former body with her slim blade. But there was a difference before. It had been male. Now it was female. That, however, seemed to make no difference in the head. In fact, Tower of Helium had noticed during the scramble and the fight about her that sex differences seemed of little moment to her captors. Males and females had taken equal part in their pursuit. Both were identically harnessed and both carried swords, and she had seen as many females as males draw their weapons at the moment that the quarrel between the two factions seemed imminent. The girl was given but a brief opportunity to further observation of the pitiful creatures in the enclosure as her captor, after having directed the others to return to the fields, led her toward the tower, which they entered, passing into an apartment about 10 feet wide and 20 long, in one end of which was a stairway leading to an upper level, and in the other an opening to a similar stairway leading downward. The chamber, though on level with the ground, was brilliantly lighted by windows in its inner wall. The light coming from the circle court in the center of the tower, the walls of this court appeared to face with what resembled glaze. white tile, and the whole interior of it flooded with dazzling light, a fact which immediately explained to the girl the purpose of the glass prisms of which the domes were constructed. The stairways themselves were sufficient to cause remark, since in nearly all Barsoomian architecture inclined runways are utilized for purpose of communication between different levels. And especially is this true in the more ancient forms and of more of the remote districts where fewer changes have come to alter the customs of antiquity. Down the stairway her captors led Tara of Helium, down and down through the chambers still lidded from the brilliant well. Occasionally they passed others going in the opposite direction, and these always stopped to examine the girl and ask questions of her captor. I know nothing but that she was found in the fields, and that I caught her after a fight in which she slew 2 Rykors, and which I slew a Mohawk, and that I take her to Lude, to whom, of course, she belongs. If Lude wishes to question her, that is for Lude to do, not for me. Thus always he answered the curious. Presently they reached the room from which the circular tunnel led away from the tower, and into this the creature conducted her. The tunnel was some 7 feet in diameter and flattened on the bottom to form a walk. For 100 feet from the tower it was lined with the same tile-like material of the light well and amply illuminated by reflecting light from that source. Upon it was faced with the stone of various shapes and sizes, neatly cut and fitted together. A very fine mosaic without a pattern. There were branches, too, and other tunnels which crossed this, and occasionally openings not more than a foot in diameter, these latter being unusually close to the floor. Above each of these smaller openings was painted a different device, while upon the walls of the larger tunnels, at all intersections and points of convergence, hieroglyphics appeared. These the girl could not read, though she guessed that they were the names of the tunnels, or notices indicating the points to which they led. She tried to study some of them out, but there was not a character that was familiar to her, which seemed strange, since while the written languages of the various nations of Barsoom differ, it still is true that they have common characters and words in common. She had tried to converse with her guard, but he did not seem inclined to talk with her, and she had finally desisted. She could not but note that he had offered her no indignities, nor had he been either unnecessarily rough or in any way cruel. The fact that she had slain 2 of the bodies with the dagger had apparently aroused no animosity or desire for revenge in the minds of the strange heads that surmounted the bodies, even those whose bodies had been killed. She did not try to understand it, since she could not approach the particular relationship between the heads and the bodies of these creatures from the biases of any past knowledge or experience of her own. So far, their treatment of her seemed to augur naught that might arouse her fears. Perhaps, after all, she had been fortunate to fall into the hands of these strange people, who might not only protect her from harm, but even aid her in returning to Helium. That they were repulsive and uncanny she could not forget, but if they meant her no harm, she could at least overlook their repulsiveness. Renewed hope aroused within her a spirit of greater cheerfulness, and it was almost blithely now that she moved at the side of her weird companion. She even caught herself humming a gay little tune that was popular in Helium. The creature at her side turned its expressionless eyes upon her. "What is that noise that you're making?" it asked. "I was but humming an air," she replied. "Humming an air," he repeated. "I do not know what you mean, but do it again. I like it." This time she sang the words while her companion listened intently. His face gave no indication of what was passing in that strange head. It was devoid of expression, as that of a spider. It reminded her of a spider. When she had finished, he turned towards her again. "That was different," he said. "I like that better, even, than the other. How do you do it?" "Why," she said, "it is singing. Do you not know what song is?" "No," he replied. "Tell me how you do it." "It is difficult to explain," she told him, "since any explanation of it presupposes some knowledge of melody and of music, while your very question indicates that you have no knowledge of either." "No," he said, "I do not know what you are talking about, but tell me how you do it." "It is merely the melodious modulations of my voice," she explained. "Listen." And again she sang. "I do not understand," he insisted. But I like it. Could you teach me to do it? I do not know, but I shall be glad to try. We will see what Lude does with you, he says. If he does not want you, I will keep you, and you shall teach me to make sounds like that. At his request, she sang again, and they continued their way along the winding tunnel, which was now lighted by occasional bulbs, which appeared to be similar to the radiant bulbs which she was so familiar, and which were common to all nations of Barsoom. In so far as she knew, having been perfected at so remote a period that her very origin was lost in antiquity, they consist, usually, of hemispherical bowl, a heavy glass in which she was packed a compound containing what, according to John Carter, must be radium. The bowl is then cemented into a metal plate with a heavily insulated back, and the whole affair, sorry, y'all, and the whole affair set in the masonry or wall or ceiling as desired, where it gives off light of greater or less intensity according to the composition of the filling material, for an almost incalculable period of time. As they proceeded, they met a greater number of the inhabitants in this underground world, and the girl noted that among many of these the metal and harnesses were more ornate than had been those of the workers in the fields above. The heads and bodies, however, were similar, even identical, she thought. No one offered her harm, and she was now experiencing a familiar feeling of relief, almost akin to happiness, when her guide turned suddenly into an opening on the right side of the tunnel, and she found herself in a large, well-lit chamber. Well-lit chamber. Oh no. Chapter 5 is the perfect brain. Okay, well, it seems she found herself in some kind of very weird places. Sean Rangi is an actor in the movie series Mom and Ann Her Sisters. Gotcha. Excellent. Hello. Sorry I got called into work tonight. Almost done. Well, I am glad that you are almost done. We are just finishing up for the night. We read through 5 chapters, technically, 4 chapters in the prelude. So I think we can do 5 chapters a session in this. And then after this, there's only 2 books left in the series. But I really, really appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight. I think it is now truly time for dinner. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if there is anybody that we can raid. A nice little ghosty reading raid, as there are still 7 of us here. Let's see who is currently on. CBC, Goaded, Johnny Knight, Lost Hero Games. Alright. Well, as this is reading and not Pokemon, we'll go to another gaming. We'll go see CBC. Yeah, I think we'll go see CBC. But really, really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, listening to the Chessmen of Mars, and I'm now starting to think that these guys are the Chessmen of Mars. And I have no idea how, like, interchangeable heads, bodies, and spider legs fit into it, but it's all very comical and very funny. I really hope that they're good guys. But thank you all. We will come back here next Monday and continue this story. If you are interested in hearing the end of the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, please jump into our Discord. We will start reading at 10 p.m. Eastern Time in the Discord voice chat of Storytime, and I'll make sure to post a reminder in the general chat before we do. But really looking forward to finishing that and then getting into those other books, as there are 7 books in that series too. But really appreciate you guys, and always remember to go out and get everything that you set out to get, and don't let anything stop you. But it takes $0 to be a good person. So remember, always do it through peace, love, and Pokemon. And don't be afraid to pick up a book. Love you all. Let's go ahead and raid CBC. No worries at all, Sean. Appreciate you. Let's go CCBC, a little reading raid, and I will catch you all tomorrow. No, you are amazing. Appreciate you guys.